Hi, welcome to the High Lady Book Club.
My name is Jessie, and I love podcast discussions and deep dives.
And I'm Katie, and I love all things Sarah J Maas and outlandish theories.
So we combine those loves into a weekly Sarah J Maas discussion podcast. We'll be reading along to her books.
We're diving into Crescent City first, and class is starting now.
This is the English class you don't want to spark note.
Welcome back to the High Lady Book Club.
Welcome back to our own weird version of English class, where we recap and do in-depth analyses on the Sarah J Maas books.
We're in the middle of Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood, and things are getting pretty interesting. So if you haven't read up to chapter 37, stop listening now because I don't want to spoil it for you. And if you have, then tune in because Jessie's about to recap chapters 30 to 37. And then we'll have a discussion on everything we've just read. And later we'll talk all things Maasverse Spoilers. So stay tuned.
Yes, here we go. So chapter 30. Bryce and Hunt arrive at the Comitium. They're there to retrieve some of Hunt's belongings since he's now going to move in with Bryce because he's officially her bodyguard. Then they pass a lot of legionaries who are like totally lusting after Bryce. It's clear she's a head turner because like these guys are like losing their minds.
I feel like all of Sarah J Maas's women are always head turners.
That's true. That's true. There's never really a protagonist that isn't hot as hell.
It's true.
I also love the detail about when her long ponytail, like just almost hitting Hunt like constantly as they're like walking through as she's like turning her head.
I know, that was great.
I feel like it just really like sums up their relationship somehow at this point.
It's true. She's just always kind of annoying him.
Yeah. So they stopped to get Bryce prior to the Comitium. They stopped to get Bryce a new cell phone since hers was destroyed in the bomb explosion at the Raven. And just a little tidbit, like Bryce is using Hunt's phone while she's waiting for her new one and discovers he only has pictures of dead bodies and dismembered body parts on his phone. And he also only has 36 photos on his 4-year-old phone. Those are the only photos he's taken.
If that doesn't tell you that he is the main love interest in a Sarah J Maas book, I don't know what does.
That is so accurate. So it's kind of sad because it's like clear at this point, like he doesn't have his own life. All his life is trying to work down this debt by like murdering people so he can become free. It made me sad for him. And also like his room isn't decorated at all. It's like blank walls because he's like, well, I could be traded as a slave at any time. So it's be like a bad omen to like try and make this place home-like at all.
He really doesn't seem to have like any life outside of work.
No, he really doesn't. Even Bryce is even like, oh, like, is there any like romantic person you're involved with? And he's like, no, I was born a bastard, so there was no one ever lining up for me. And he doesn't mention Sahar at this point, which we know about from his internal monologue.
Right.
And Bryce is also wondering, like, why aren't you the commander of the 33rd? You're so powerful. You have this lightning ability. And I loved Hunt's reply. He said, because I piss off too many people and don't give a shit that I do.
I know, that was pretty great. He just doesn't even seem to care about, like, I don't know, just, like, moving his life forward. He's just sort of like, I am who I am, and I'm a miserable bastard, and that is what it is.
Yeah, and Bryce is kind of at the same point right now. She was like, that might be one thing we have in common.
I know, that was great.
Yeah, but we do see, like, she's definitely starting to soften toward him as well.
Yeah.
Because now she's in his space, and she's seeing his life and realizing he's maybe not maybe not an alpha hole, maybe.
Right.
And so
Maybe a
they're
little
about,
bit.
yeah, maybe he still kind of is, but maybe not as much as she thought.
Right.
So they're about to leave the comitium when they're like getting off the elevators and come face to face with Sandriel and Micah in the lobby. There's like a huge crowd around them. And Isaiah is there, who was like, "Oh, I was gonna warn you, but it's too late."
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah. Bryce says it's from her point of view that she can like feel Sandriel's power, and all these people there are kneeling before her, but Hunt is like refusing to kneel. He's shaking. Bryce looks at him and says he's somewhere between rage and terror. And she quickly comes up with like some kind of escape plan where she pulls out her new phone and like takes pictures of like her and Hunt in front of Micah and Sandriel and just kind of pretends to be like a tourist and acting like Hunt took her there just for those purposes. But
Yeah.
Micah kind of confronts them, and Hunt confesses that they were just there so he could get his stuff. And Isaiah does back him up. But then Micah is like eyeing up Bryce like every single male does in this universe. Micah kind of confronts them, and Hunt confesses that they were just there so he could get his stuff. And Isaiah does back him up. But then Micah is like eyeing up Bryce like every single male does in this universe. And as they're like going up the elevator, Micah's like, "Can I take you out for dinner?" And she's like, "I'm not interested."
I know, and I kind of loved the description around Micah in that chapter. Like, Bryce is very much not interested in him. She, in her internal monologue, she's like, "Too bad that you are a terrible human being who owns slaves, and too bad that you're this and that." And the way he's described, it's like a cold hand grabs her elbow, a cold, strong hand. So he's like just very much kind of like a creepy. There's no warmth to this guy. He's just sort of a creepy, gross man with a lot of power.
Yeah, we know he's an enemy. Like, you can just
Right.
tell.
Right.
I also enjoyed her little rant when Hunt was like, "Why did you say no to dinner with Micah?" And she's like, "The world acts like I exist just to find someone like him." And she just hates the idea of the assumption that like a strong, powerful male comes around and asks her out, and like, why would she say no? Like, of course she would want that. Why wouldn't she want that? And she kind of, Hunt is like, "You have a chip on your shoulder," after she goes on like this long, like,
I know, I love her rant, but I do think she makes a good point. It's like, well, because I just don't like him. Like, why is that not enough? You know?
oh yeah. Hunt actually carries Bryce off the roof. They're flying over the city. She's like not looking down. And
Right.
I kind of love that they're like forced into this position where Hunt has to carry Bryce around.
I know.
Then we're on to chapter 32, and Micah calls Hunt once they're back at Bryce's apartment, and he says he has work for him tonight, aka murdering someone. He also says what happened earlier in the lobby that day is to never happen again. It seems like he's kind of making Hunt do this murder as like a punishment almost for what
Right.
happened earlier, for like embarrassing him.
Right.
But Micah does still say that their deal that they made about him if he solves the murders still stands. So there's that.
Yeah, at least he didn't take that away.
Yeah. And then we see Hunt goes to kill this cougar shifter, and we clearly see that Hunt enjoys no part of this.
Right.
It's just kind of a awful scene. And he comes back feeling bad, as one probably does after being forced to murder someone. And Bryce is like, "I recorded that Sunball game you wanted to watch." And he just like goes into his room and is like, "Thanks." But it just like closes the door. It was like, aw, like Bryce is kind of like trying.
Yeah, I
I
kind of
thought that
love
was
that she
cute.
fully knows that he just murdered somebody in cold blood. And she's like, hey, how you doing? I recorded that game for you. Like, she's like worried about him still. She definitely has like a bleeding heart. That's pretty clear. Yeah.
She really does. So now we're on to chapter 33, and Hunt goes to the Oracle.
Yeah.
This was a huge chapter. Hunt finds out that someone wants the horn because they want to open a doorway between worlds, and that it can be repaired, but we
Yeah.
don't know how, and we don't know who wants the horn still. The Oracle also offers to tell Hunt what she sees in his future, but he's like, no, I'm good. I don't want to know. But I
I
was
know.
like, I was like, no. I was like, come on, don't be this person. Like,
I
don't
know.
walk away.
If I had the chance to see my future, I mean, 100 times out of 100 times, I'm going to say yes. I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to find out what my future holds. Who doesn't want to do that? Who doesn't want to know?
I know.
Especially when you live forever.
Yeah. And especially with like all this crazy stuff going on, it might be good to
Yeah.
know what's coming, you know? But no, he's like, no, I don't want to know.
Although maybe that's actually better because, we were talking about the whole Oedipus Rex idea where you hear this prophecy and then you do everything you can to change it and then you end up making it come true. So maybe Hunt's just like avoiding that whole disaster.
I could see that. Avoiding a That's So Raven episode.
Exactly.
What she did to try and stop the vision made it come true.
That is so accurate. A
Anyway,
nice
for my
TBT.
That's So Raven fans, just all right.
Any other
Anyway,
millennials out there?
yeah. Back to the recap. So, chapter 34. Hunt's filling in Bryce and Rune about what the Oracle said because they refuse to be like anywhere near it because of their terrible experiences.
Right.
They theorize again who's after the horn, especially knowing this new information. Rune says he's not sure that he could even use the horn because his starborn power is so little.
Right.
And they also mentioned they heard that the horn has a sentience, almost like it was alive.
Yeah,
Which is
that's
very
interesting.
Rune is going to look into med witches to see if they know anything about maybe how the horn could be repaired. Then when it's just Hunt and Bryce back at the gallery, they're both doing research. Hunt reveals what the Oracle told him about her. And she shares the custom of the Oracle, what led her to do it. And she shares what happened when she went to the Oracle. When the Oracle looked into the smoke, she screamed, clawed at her eyes, and Bryce heard that she went blind for a week.
I know, how insane is that? You just show up to find out your future, and the person who's supposed to know it screams, has no words for you, and then goes blind. Like, how bad is your future that that is what you see?
Yeah, this is like unheard of.
Right.
Yeah, her father is like, you're worthless. Get out of here.
Yeah, the
Packs
Autumn
her
King.
bags, kicks her out. The Autumn King is like, I'm done with you. But Bryce doesn't tell Hunt that this is the Autumn King who's her father.
Right.
But my first thought was like, okay, the Oracle went blind. Maybe like how the Fae with Starborn power used to be able to blind people.
Interesting.
I don't know. We'll get into it
Yeah,
a little bit more in our discussion.
we have
We
a
have a
lot to
lot.
break down from this chapter, so we'll keep that short
Yes.
for now.
Yes. Also, in chapter 34, Hunt finds this old vase with a depiction of the Crystallos, and it looks like it's being killed by a sword from by a normal warrior. So this gives Hunt hope that this demon could potentially be killed with brute force, not necessarily impossible
Right.
to kill.
Right. And you don't need some special power to do it.
Yeah. And the vase is from Parthos, which Hunt thought was a myth, was somewhere that didn't exist. It is said to be an ancient library in the heart of a pre-existing human civilization.
Yeah. Hunt thinks it's a myth, but Bryce Bryce seems to believe in Parthos.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be something there. Chapter 35, Hunt and Bryce go to meet with Briggs. And this place sounds really, this holding area, it sounds eerie, like it's designed for torture. It's super
Yeah.
creepy. Briggs doesn't even know what date it is. Like his first question is like, what's the date? They inform him, and they also tell him about the White Raven bombing and think that the human rebels are behind it. He says he's had no contact with the outside world. He basically just gets tortured every day and feels like he's failed his followers. He says he doesn't know anything about Luna's Horn and that he actually liked Danica. Even though she busted him, he liked her.
Yeah.
Which Bryce is like, what? Like, she's shocked by this. And he reveals that Danica actually tried to warn him and his followers to stop their plans. And he actually thinks that she was potentially on her way to becoming a sympathizer with their cause, which Bryce is like, no, she was not. But according to Briggs, he and the Kara's rebels, they didn't kill Danica or the Pack of Devils. They thought that she could be a potential asset, so they would not have done that. He does say that the White Raven bombing could have been the human rebels. And he's kind of like, if it was them, then good. Did they kill any Veneer? Yeah, so it's kind of like a dead end with him.
Right.
Yeah, and Briggs also mentions as Hunt's about to leave that he was one of the fallen and tries to strike up some sort of like camaraderie with him. And Hunt reflects on his part in the Angel Rebellion and is kind of feeling like, am I like this guy? Like, is this what I was like?
Yeah, like just hoping for anyone's death on the other side of this.
Yeah, and Bryce and Hunt go back to her apartment, and Hunt shares that he was tortured for 7 years after the rebellion, and then two more years by his first handler. Yeah, so pretty rough.
Yeah, the more and more that we learn about Hunt's past, the darker and more horrific it gets. Poor guy.
I know, like, yeah, his life has been bleak.
Yeah.
Bryce comforts Hunt, says that he has kindness, he's nothing like Briggs. And she like touches his hand. They're definitely like have like a little moment. And I also loved that Hunt is like drinking a beer and wearing a backwards Sunball hat. And Bryce is just so amused because she's like, you're the shadow of death, but you're also just such a guy.
I know, I love that too.
Yeah. They are also discussing the suspect list. They say Briggs is off the list. So is the Viper Queen. And they wonder if Danica was stationed at Luna's temple that night, why didn't she come forward about that? And why didn't the Acolyte say anything about her being there? And so they want to send the footage from that night to someone who can do a more comprehensive analysis. So, chapter 36, Bryce and Hunt are on their way to a shooting range to meet up with Rune and his friends, Tristan Flynn and Declan Emmett. They're basically there so Bryce can ask Declan if he can do more hacking shit to analyze the footage from that night.
Right.
Flynn asks if the Autumn King's one of the suspects, and Bryce is just like, I just want to keep it quiet. She doesn't confirm or deny that.
Right.
Rune, Tristan, and Declan are all being very bro-y, and they bet Bryce that she can't outshoot them. And then so Bryce is like, all right. She nonchalantly grabs this huge sniper and shoots 3 times so precisely that the bullets go through the same hole 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely ballsy of them to challenge her at this because we did learn earlier that she was raised by a legendary sharpshooter, Randall Salago. So, I don't know. It's surprising, but it's not, you know?
Yeah, I feel like they knew her abilities, and I think they wanted to kind of like have her show off to Hunt.
Yeah, I feel like that's more believable than the fact that like they had grown up with her and didn't know this.
Yeah, I think they wanted to be like, Hunt, like, this girl's pretty impressive. So she has this moment. She is a, perfect shot. I don't know gun terms, but
No.
but so Hunt just like looks at her. They have this moment where he's like, this doesn't intimidate me. I'm not like freaked out by this. He just takes the gun, grabs it, and shoots exactly through the same hole that she made. So,
Yeah. And they have this weird moment where they're like, I see you and you see me. And I don't know, I can't relate to that. I feel like that would just terrorize me, but it seems to work for them. I don't know. They have a strange thing going on.
yeah. Yeah, being a good shot is not really my love language, but it seems like it might be theirs. But per usual, this like intimate moment is interrupted by Isaiah saying there's been another murder. So,
Yeah, let's just quickly crash our spirits real quick.
right, like they're making a little connection, and then it's like, oh yeah, someone else was murdered again.
Let's bring us back down to the reality that both of
Yeah,
you have crappy lives. Don't forget.
yeah, don't forget. So, chapter 37, Rune, Tristan, and Declan are all leaving to go to the crime scene. Hunt is checking in with Bryce, asks if he just wants her to go to check it out instead of pulling her there like before. She says she wants to go, but she doesn't want Rune and his friends seeing her like a mess. She's trying to pull herself together, and Hunt kind of helps her steady herself, helps her take deep breaths. They definitely have more of a moment of like, he's there for her. They
Mm-hmm.
go to this Asphodel Meadows. The victim seems to be one of the guards at Luna's temple who was on duty the night the horn went missing. Bryce maps out where all the murders happened and realizes they all took place within steps of major avenues. And so these major avenues are all natural channels for the first light to travel through the city. So they're kind of figuring out whoever is summoning the demon is using the power of these lines under the city to summon it. So they
Right.
have Vic look into any abnormal spikes of power or drops in temperature that may happen if a demon was summoned. Rune and the boys leave the scene. Hunt asks Bryce if she and Tristan ever hooked up because they kind of had a flirty thing, and she kind of dodges the question, but she's like, what about you? Who have you hooked up with? And he's, sad, brooding, like, Shahar has ruined me for anyone else. Like, Bryce asks if he still has a thing for her, and he says he doesn't see how he can ever move on because she gave up everything for him and the cause. And every time he hooks up, he remembers it. So,
Yeah, he's like, I will have a thing for her till the day I die, basically.
yeah, like very intense. So it's kind of like, oh, okay. Like you can tell Bryce is, disappointed by that.
It's kind of a buzzkill. I mean,
Oh yeah, they have this like flirtationship, and then it's just like, I'm still in love with this woman that died, and no one could ever replace her. It's like,
right.
ooh. And then Hunt's about to kind of say something like, oh, but that doesn't mean like maybe about something about them, but they're interrupted again, of course. And it's Sabine walking down the frickin' street.
That horrible bitch.
Yeah, Bryce immediately is like freaking out. Sabine's yelling, where the fuck is my sword? Calls her a stupid slut. And Hunt just like scoops her up and they fly back to her apartment, which I think was the best move for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was kind of sad to see Bryce. Bryce get so like small and humiliated, and she just clearly has a lot of um I don't know, just embarrassment and guilt whenever she faces Sabine. I feel like she, maybe blames herself for Danica's death or whatever else went on. And every time she sees Sabine or anybody in the pack or related to the wolves, she just really shrinks.
I think Hunt even had that internal monologue where he's like, she is like badass, doesn't care. We'll turn down Micah like that, like kind of thing. But when it comes to like Sabine, she's like shaking, like barely knows what to say. So clearly she
Yeah.
is so affected by seeing anyone like related to Danica. So he gets her out of that situation, and Declan calls Bryce and says he found out that someone swapped the footage of the temple during the time of the horns theft. Declan says he looked at who was responsible for heading up the investigation of the video footage that night. And the only person with the clearance to make that swap is Sabine.
Wow. Mic drop.
Yeah.
Um, that's classically where we end on this nice cliffhanger. And things are really moving along in this murder investigation. But I think we should take a quick break and then we have to come back and discuss our new suspects.
Yes, we do.
Welcome back. I think we should jump right into our murder investigation. So let's just get into it. We were introduced to two new suspects, and we crossed two suspects off the list these chapters. So we said goodbye to the Viper Queen and Philip Briggs. They are no longer, at least from Bryce's point of view and Hunt's, they're no longer on the list. What do you think about crossing them off?
So Briggs did kind of feel like a dead end because he felt like Danica was an asset, and I truly believed that.
Yeah.
But the Viper Queen, no. I like we covered in a previous episode, I think her alibis were too tight that it was suspicious. I think she's still on the list.
All right, I agree. Let's keep the Viper Queen on our list. We'll kick Philip Briggs off. I agree with you. I feel like even if it's his group, which it doesn't sound like it is, Philip Briggs himself is clearly just so far from this place and from life that I don't think he could be involved in any way, shape, or form. But so we have two new suspects officially on the list. We put Sabine, which Jessie has had on her list this whole time.
I had been waiting for this. Though I have to say, now that she's on the list so early, I was kind of like, I feel like Sarah J Maas, like, it's, you never like see it coming. So now that she's on their radar, the only reason I question it is because I'm familiar with her books and that kind of thing. But I do think
that's very fair.
I do think with everything, she has motive. Clearly there's something going on with switching the tapes. Like,
at the very least, she clearly knows more than she is letting on. Whether or not she murdered or was involved in the murder, she knows more about this murder than she's saying, at least. I think we can confirm that. And so, someone swapped the footage from the temple during the night of the theft, like Jessie just taught us, and the audio was from the Rose Gate. So the person who was responsible, the person who was able to switch those audios was Sabine. And they talk about how this was a really smart choice because they would have sounded similar between the Rose Gate and where Luna's horn was. It also was someone who had to have high clearances, like Declan said. And we know earlier, because we found out that all of these murders are being taken place where there are no cameras. And that actually sounds kind of difficult because there are cameras that are in plain sight, but there are also a lot of cameras that people don't know about. So you have to have clearances to know where all of the cameras in Crescent City are. And now there's been, like 4 murders?
Yeah, it's really stacking up.
Yeah. There's been like 4 murders and they've all been out of sight of the cameras. So Sabine is probably somebody who would have that clearance.
Exactly. Yeah. She is someone who would know where the hidden cameras are. It makes me think whoever is behind this has to be someone high up, because how else would you know where the hidden cameras are?
Right. Exactly. The other thing on our list of, things that we are checking for in every suspect is, would they have a reason to want the horn, or would they know about the horn? Because clearly the horn is involved. Now it's been two people associated with Luna's temple. It was Danica was, at this place, and now this footage was swapped in the audio, so we don't know what actually happened the night this horn was taken. So whoever committed this murder has to know about Luna's horn in some capacity. But I guess that's where Sabine is a question mark for me.
Yeah, like, would she know about Luna's horn? Would she have any
Right.
idea that it was powerful or useful?
The
Yeah,
only thing we know for sure that she's looking for is the sword.
true. That is the only thing she brings up every
And
time. Yeah. And I think Bryce knows where it is.
we do know that Bryce was the last person to see it, so she
Yes.
probably knows.
But she's
Um,
not telling Sabine.
right, right. So yeah, I feel like Sabine is a solid contender. I totally know what you mean by it is early on in the book. So I don't know that, yeah.
So them being onto it, that's the only reason I'm like, oh.
The other person that they mentioned just briefly is the new witch queen Hypaxia, which we talked briefly about when the Autumn King has decided that Rune should marry her because she's vulnerable. It'll be great for their
Mm-hmm.
power, all of that terrible stuff. But so they briefly say, could it be that Hypaxia is doing this and she's sort of testing her power? But they think that it's unlikely because the witches have notoriously been faithful to the Asteri. And so they wouldn't be going behind the Asteri's backs and committing these murders. And she, being the queen, wouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, I feel like it would be a lot for her to do in the wake of her mother's like unforeseen death. Like that would be a lot to, I mean, definitely possible, but she's not really on my radar at this point as a suspect.
And she isn't even from here. So that's also interesting, too, that she would be coming, from a different place to Crescent City to just be committing these murders. And, there's no mention of her here.
Yeah, it feels a little far-fetched at this point. Maybe we'll learn more that connects the dots a bit more. At this point, my top suspect is Sabine. She's like number one on my list. And the Autumn King is second on my list. He has a lot of motive with his interest in the horn. He clearly knows he's looking for the horn himself. So we know he probably knows that it's powerful and wants it for a specific reason. And then I think the Viper Queen is somehow involved.
Yeah. So I don't think we can rule out Hypaxia. We just don't know enough information.
Yeah.
We've got the Viper Queen. She's still on our list. Autumn King, very high up, and then Sabine. I agree. I think those are our top four suspects.
Yeah, we'll see how this all shapes up.
Yeah, definitely. So switching gears a little bit, there was one name meeting that I wanted to talk about that we've actually heard mentioned a couple times, but it just occurred to me this week to look into it, and it turns out it was actually kind of interesting. So the battle that Hunt and Shahar lost took place on Mount Hermon, and so Mount Hermon is actually a biblical reference. It's actually technically one of two potential places, but we'll run with it. It's potentially one of the places where people think that Jesus' transfiguration occurred. And so what happened was Jesus went up to Mount Hermon with two of his disciples, and Moses and Elijah appeared to him, and Jesus was transfigured. And so it was described as Jesus' clothes and face becoming bright light like the sun and as white as light. It was significant because it was an event that confirmed him as a divinity himself and really as the son of God. And that's significant when you look at Crescent City because the Battle of Mount Hermon is kind of the opposite of that biblical reference. It's where everything is lost. And it marks the time when Hunt became a slave to the Republic and what was nicknamed a fallen angel. So I thought that was interesting. Just a fun little name. I
Yeah.
think she's so clever.
Yeah, that she does do a lot of clever things with that, like with names and places. I love that. It's almost like an antithesis to the
Right.
Transfiguration.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Yeah, switching gears again, though, I did want to talk about Sunball because I did think it was so funny. We see Hunt just wearing that hat, and she's, like you said, Bryce is like, he's such a guy. But so Sunball is a big sport in this world, but we really don't know what it looks like or how it's played, any of the rules. We don't really know any of that. And actually, in one of her interviews, Sarah J Maas said that this was intentional on her part, which is not surprising because everything she does is intentional.
Mm-hmm.
But she said that she wanted people to be able to picture whatever sport they wanted, but in her mind, it's a super hot sport. So it's like whatever sport you think is the hottest sport, that's what it is. And so she thinks of hockey or soccer. So I'm curious, what sport would you picture as the hottest sport?
I definitely like reading the books. I think of it like it seems like football to me. Just like sitting in front of the TV watching football. I don't, for some reason, I feel like maybe it was going to Penn State, but football was like the big thing, the hot thing that everyone talks about. It's like, oh, you were at a party with like so and so from the team. Like that was a huge deal. So that's what I definitely think of.
I agree. I think of football too. I feel like it's just the one that I in my life watch the most. I don't watch that many sports, but it's the one that I know the most about and that everybody like gathers to watch too, which I feel like is very much of a thing throughout. Even when Danica was alive, they would go to football games at their university, or sorry, not football, sunball games, which reminds me of going to football games in college. So yeah, that's definitely what I thought of too. But so Sarah J. Maas does actually know the rules of Sunball and all of the specifics. And she said she might one day work it into a book. But for now, she's just content to let
Wow.
everybody picture what they want.
I'm so curious, like, what the sport actually is. Is it going to be
I
like a
know.
Quidditch type?
That's also what I was thinking. Like, just a completely weird sport of, because they do have powers in this world. So they could just throw
Yeah.
magic in.
It can be another game where there's a game happening while someone's just going around looking for the snitch that will just end the game.
Yes. Yeah. That just has me thinking about Quidditch is like now actually a sport in colleges. Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
can play Quidditch. And I
That's
just kind of
true.
hope that one day you can play Sunball too.
That would be amazing.
I
It's
know,
going to
right?
be me and you on our own team.
It will be a really bad team then because we are not the most athletic people. But that's all
No.
right. Um, Anyway, the last and probably biggest topic that I want to talk about is the Oracle. That's all in chapter 33. If you did not read it or recently, you should really go back and read it because I just feel like every sentence in that chapter is like very meaningful. So the Oracle tells Hunt that someone wants the horn to open a doorway between worlds and they want to reopen the Northern Rift. So we learn that the horn isn't just for closing them, but opening them as well, and it depends on what the bearer wishes. So that's has a lot of potential for where this entire storyline could be going, even with books ahead. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like whoever it is wants to do it for, it's always some like power reason.
Mm-hmm.
Someone is going to do this to make themselves. It really just reminds me of the Fae Autumn King. Like
Yeah.
because he was looking at the like the planets and their worlds and thinking about light and all these things that I think really have to do with the horn. And I think he's trying to find out a way of opening another world, maybe one that he can rule or to bring in people that will help him come back into power or something along those lines.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like it has so many potential meanings. It clearly is somebody in power. I definitely think you're right. We also learn about Bryce's visit to the Oracle, how the Oracle screamed and clawed her eyes out and went blind for a week. And the Oracle asked if Hunt wanted to know what happened, and he says no. And I thought that was very respectful of Hunt. But we still get it from Bryce's point of view. And you were talking a little about what you thought this could mean, but I thought we could go into more depth here.
I totally applaud Hunt for being such a kind person who's like, no, she's entitled to her privacy. I'm not owed that information. Whereas, like, I think a lot of us would be like, yeah, what's the tea?
I would 100% be finding that information out.
Oh yeah, I'd be like, this is confidential, right? You can't tell anyone that you told me. Then like, yeah, oh yeah, tell
Let's hear
me.
it.
But yeah, as soon as I read that she blinded the Oracle for a week, I'm like, that just reminded me of what the Fae Autumn King was saying about how the Fae used their power was so strong they would blind, that it could blind people. The Starborn power. I think that Bryce has this power, and I think that is what the Oracle saw. And that is why she freaked out, because Bryce is going to do something so important in this world using her power that maybe, I don't
Yeah.
know what it's going to do, but it's going to be huge. And that's why the Oracle freaked out.
I think there's some interesting things that could definitely support that theory too. We have the idea that Rune has this like barely any power with according to the Starborn power. He has power but not Starborn. And he's saying, you know, I don't even know that I can operate the horn if we can get it because I barely have any power. So that's interesting. Like, could somebody else have this power? Could it be Bryce? Also, just learning that there were multiple lines of Starborn Fae is interesting too. And I'm just gonna keep on going in my clown car and really just think that Bryce's mom is potentially it has this Starborn power from Thea's line. So I'm running with it. I like your theory.
I think it would make sense because I think she's going to be extremely powerful. And maybe it's because she has Starborn power from both sides.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Maybe we'll find
Um,
out.
yeah. So also, the Oracle makes a couple comments to Hunt. The Oracle says, Hunt reminds her of that which was lost long ago. She had not realized it might ever reappear again. And that just has me thinking, who does Hunt remind her of? Where did they go? And reappearing? I don't know.
I think that means that he's going to do something big as well.
Yeah.
I think him and Bryce both have. I mean, he didn't want to know what his future was, but I think they both. So, kind of at this point, both of their futures are a mystery. And I think
Yeah.
that's because together they're going to have some huge impact.
Interesting. I definitely think that could be true. And I'm also wondering if this vision that the Oracle has could at all be related to this idea that no one in living memory had this lightning power. And so we're seeing this person with this special power that no one in living memory, but could the Oracle remember somebody who had lightning power that she's oh, I never thought that this would reappear. Or could it be something related to that? I don't know. I think that has to be linked in some way.
Yeah, definitely. And I
Yeah,
hope we find out soon. I want to know all the answers.
I know. And the Oracle gives a warning to Hunt, and she says, "Do yourself a favor, Hunt Athalar. Keep well away from Bryce Quinlan." And so that just immediately made me think of the myths around Orion and how his lover ended up killing him. And I'm just like, will Bryce end up killing Hunt? Because that will make me very sad.
That would make me so sad as well. But I can kind of see, I mean, it was such a cryptic warning.
Right.
I feel like it could be something like that.
Yeah. It could also just simply be that she was blinded the last time she interacted with Bryce, so she just thinks Bryce gives off bad vibes or something.
True. And I'm sure the Oracle is kind of all seeing and knows that Bryce and Hunt are like intertwined right now. But I also thought it
Right.
was interesting how she just brought up, like, oh, do you want to know Bryce's future without he didn't ask or inquire about it. It makes me think that maybe she sees Bryce in his future and she's trying to be like,
Ah.
stay away. I
Yeah,
don't know.
maybe when she said that, it's because their futures are somehow entwined.
Yeah, that chapter was, I was like, oh my God, we're getting all this information. This is so interesting.
I know.
So much to theorize.
I know, right?
Okay, so I think it's time for our Maasverse discussion. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be discussing Sarah J Maas's other series, Throne of Glass and Akatar. So if you haven't finished both of those series, join us at our next episode. And if you have read both of them, stay tuned for after the break.
All right, welcome back for our spoiler discussion. Again, a spoiler warning if you haven't read Throne of Glass or Akatar, stop here. But in continuing with our Oracle conversation, we learned that Luna's Horn can open and close portals between worlds. And that just off the bat reminded me of word keys in Throne of Glass.
Yeah, because that's literally how that was like such a big plot point in Throne of Glass.
Yeah. Throne of Glass's world and Crescent City and Akatar are definitely in some way connected because in Kingdom of Ash, when Aelin is falling through worlds, she does
Mm-hmm.
see, first of all, she sees Feyre and Rhys in Akatar, but she also sees a city in the shape of a crescent moon along the water, aka Crescent City.
Um,
Um, so we know that somehow they're linked, and my first thought was, could Luna's horn be a word key that somehow got into Crescent City? But the word keys were destroyed by Aelin and her group. So I don't know. I'm at a loss for that right now.
yeah. It what also Luna's horn seems sentient. And that immediately reminded me of the Dread Trove from Akatar.
Right.
So to me, I'm thinking that that's further evidence that it's a fourth part of the trove, like the piece of bone
Right.
that
It
Nesta
definitely
saw.
is. It definitely right, right. It definitely is. Could it have been made from like a piece of a word key, or is it simply just similar to a word key? I don't know.
Okay, so you think maybe it could be both?
Right, right,
Oh, to connect them all.
right. Because all three
Interesting.
worlds seem to be connected in some
Yeah.
way because Aelin fell through all of them.
Yeah. Which I didn't like I haven't read Throne of Glass in a little while, so that is so like that is just such a cool. It was such a cool scene her like falling through. I mean, it was terrifying at the
Right,
time, but looking back,
right.
it was a cool
Now that
scene.
we know she's okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's
Yeah.
stressful. I mean, yeah, maybe it is a word key and part of maybe they're all connected.
Right. Or maybe it's just that this part of the Dread Trove is also what a word key could do. Um, I don't know. I just think that it's interesting that it's Luna's, and Luna is similar to Deanna in Throne of Glass. It's Luna's horn. So I don't know if somehow I'm thinking maybe the Dread Trove could be related to word keys in some way.
Yeah, I think it would make sense. I mean, they're all extremely powerful tools
Right.
that can do like incredible things.
Right. And horrible things.
Yes,
um,
incredible and
yeah.
horrible.
So, also from the Oracle, she calls Hunt the Lord of Lightning, which of course could just be a nod to his power. But given that the Oracle also says, that he reminds her of that which was lost long ago, and she never thought it would reappear, it just has me thinking that maybe that title has more meaning. And so, immediately, Lord of Lightning, when I'm thinking mythology, I think of Thor, which I think of Thor because of the Marvel movies. But actually, that does come from Norse mythology, not from Marvel. Um,
I
that's
did
just
see that
my
in,
knowledge.
yeah, I did see it in the Norse mythology book I was
Oh,
going through Barnes
okay.
and Noble the other week.
Yeah. Yeah, we should probably get that book.
We should.
Um, but so there's a lot of info on Thor. He's hammer wielding and associated with lightning and thunder, which, is pretty standard knowledge about Thor that adds up in Marvel. But also, he's associated with the protection of mankind, which I think is relevant for Hunt, since in this entire book, we're learning about this inequality of, just living between the humans and the veneer, and all of this undertone and these rebellions and all of these things to support these, or to kind of demolish these hierarchies that keep humans at the bottom. And so I think it's interesting that Thor is also a protector of humankind, because Hunt kind of takes a role like that, at least when he was the head of the rebellion.
Yeah, when he was free to do things like that.
Yeah, back when he was free, right. So he fathered a goddess called Thread, which means strength, and she was actually a Valkyrie, which I think is interesting because we've heard of Valkyries before.
Yes, in Nesta's book, A Court of Silver Flames, Nesta starts basically learning the Valkyrie techniques. They were female warriors and fighters and had their own ways of fighting.
Yeah, and so Valkyrie in mythology, in Norse mythology, means chooser of the slain. And they are female figures who guide souls of the dead to a majestic hall in Asgard. And Asgard is like a planet where the gods live. It's home of the Aesir gods specifically. And so I think it's interesting because we've really been seeing a theme of the underworld and hell all throughout. And now we kind of learn that Valkyrie has this meaning in the underworld as well.
Yeah, we're really in like a hell universe right now.
Yeah, we kind of are. And so just has me thinking, could the Lord of Lightning be somebody prominent in hell, that Hunt is somehow related to somebody prominent in hell? I don't know.
Yeah, like as we descend through these different levels, that he's going to come into his own position or power, maybe.
Yeah, or just maybe even just discover who he is. We learn, that he's a bastard born. We don't know anything about his father, and that is definitely a red flag to me.
Yeah, that means that he probably is some descendant of someone pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Another sort of parallel to Akatar was when we were talking about Parthos, which is the myth about an ancient library in the heart of a pre-existing human civilization. And that's a Crescent City myth. That is not a myth of that, an Earth myth, if you will. But Parthos on Earth does have meaning, and it's a settlement of the Illyrian tribe in southern Illyria, which is now modern Albania. And so I didn't know that Illyria was a real place. I thought that that was a made up word by Sarah J Maas. But I think it's interesting that this ancient library, what has a name associated with Illyria, which is in Akatar.
Right, like the Illyrian soldiers.
Right.
Or they might have had a different word for them. But they were like a race.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So just a lot of interesting parallels to Akatar there. I don't necessarily know what it means. I don't have a fully developed theory yet. But one thing we do have a fully developed theory on is that there is a dust court. And I would just like to point out that in chapter 35, there is another mention of Bryce having dust-colored nails. So once again, I don't know. I think that's proof. There's a dust court.
I also, when they were mentioned again, I was like, I really feel like that is just Sarah dropping these little hints here and there and just thinking no one is going to piece it together, but I think we're piecing it together.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm still strong on that theory.
I am completely on board.
Yeah. So I think that's everything that we wanted to touch base on for these sets of chapters. We'll continue our investigation next week. So read chapters 38 to 47 for next week. And yeah, I can't wait to come up with some more fully developed theories next week.
Yeah, some more outlandish theories, maybe another clown car. Maybe we'll get more evidence for our dusk court theory.
Yes. Yeah. We must.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed listening or watching, please give us a like, a review, share this with a friend, literally anything. We would love that.
Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you this time next week.
Thanks.
Thanks for attending English class today.
To keep the discussion going, join us on Instagram at the High Lady Book Club.
Make sure you do your homework for next week, and we'll see you back here.